Sometimes the most broken places hold the greatest capacity for healing. When Maria stepped onto that dusty ranch with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of desperate hope, she thought she was trading her dignity for survival. She never imagined that the scarred man who barely spoke above a whisper would become the voice that called her home. This is the story of two souls who discovered that love doesn't always arrive wrapped in pretty packages. Sometimes it comes wearing work boots and carrying the weight of yesterday's pain, ready to build tomorrow's dreams one honest conversation at a time. The bus wheezed to a stop at the crossroads, its brakes squealing like a wounded animal. Maria clutched her small duffel bag tighter as she stepped onto the dusty pavement, the afternoon sun beating down mercilessly on the empty stretch of highway. The driver barely glanced at her before pulling away, leaving her standing alone in a cloud of exhaust and regret. She had exactly $37 in her pocket, no phone, and nowhere to go except the address scrawled on a piece of paper that had been folded and unfolded so many times the ink was beginning to fade. The ranch job posting had been torn from a community bulletin board in the last town, offering room and board in exchange for housekeeping and cooking. No questions asked, no references required. It was exactly what Maria needed, even if it wasn't what she wanted. The walk down the dirt road felt endless. Her shoes, once white sneakers that had seen better days, kicked up small clouds of dust with each step. The landscape stretched out in all directions, vast and unforgiving, with nothing but scrub brush and the occasional fence post to break the monotony. Maria had grown up in the city, where buildings reached toward the sky, and there was always somewhere to go, someone to see. This place felt like the edge of the world, where people came to disappear. After an hour of walking, she finally saw the ranch house in the distance. It was a low, sprawling structure that had once been white but had faded to a weathered gray. The roof sagged slightly in places, and the porch wrapped around the front like tired arms. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and she could see horses moving lazily in a distant pasture. It wasn't much to look at, but it was shelter, and that was all that mattered now. As she approached the house, Maria rehearsed what she would say. She had practiced the story so many times that it almost felt true. She was a widow looking for a fresh start, she would tell them. Her husband had died in an accident, leaving her with nothing but debt and bad memories. She needed work and a place to stay while she got back on her feet. It wasn't entirely a lie, just a careful rearrangement of the truth. The front door was solid wood, painted blue but peeling around the edges. Maria raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. Once she crossed this threshold, there would be no going back. She had burned every bridge that could have led her back to her old life, made choices that could never be undone. This ranch, this job, this stranger who was about to open the door, they represented her only chance at something resembling safety. She knocked 3 times, the sound echoing across the empty porch. Footsteps approached from inside, heavy and deliberate. The door opened, and Maria found herself face to face with the man who would either save her or send her back out into the wilderness. He was tall, probably in his early 40s, with dark hair that was graying at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. But it was the scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw that caught her attention, a thick, angry line that told a story of its own. He didn't smile when he saw her, just studied her with those gray eyes as if he could read her entire history in her face. "You hear about the job?" His voice was rough, like he didn't use it very often. "Yes, sir. I saw your posting in town. I can cook and clean, and I'm a hard worker." Maria kept her voice steady, professional, even though her heart was hammering in her chest. He looked her up and down, taking in her worn clothes and the way she held herself like someone who had learned to expect the worst. "Name's Jake Morrison. This is my ranch." He stepped aside to let her enter. "I suppose you'd better come in." The interior of the house was sparse but clean. The living room held a worn leather couch, a coffee table stacked with ranch magazines, and a stone fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Everything was functional, practical, with no decorative touches to soften the edges. It felt like a place where someone lived but didn't truly inhabit. "Coffee?" Jake asked, already heading toward what she assumed was the kitchen. "Yes, please." Maria followed him through the house, noting the way the floorboards creaked in certain spots and how the afternoon light streamed through windows that could use a good cleaning. The kitchen was larger than she had expected, with a long wooden table that could seat 8 people and cabinets that stretched to the ceiling. It was obvious that this room had once been the heart of a busy household, but now it felt hollow, like an echo of better times. Jake poured coffee from a pot that looked like it had been sitting on the stove for hours. He handed her a mug without asking how she liked it. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it was warm, and Maria wrapped her hands around the mug gratefully. "So what's your story?" Jake leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "What brings a city woman out to the middle of nowhere looking for ranch work?" Maria had prepared for this question, but sitting in his kitchen, under his penetrating stare, the rehearsed words stuck in her throat. There was something about him that made her want to tell the truth, which was dangerous. The truth would send her running back down that dusty road with nowhere to go. "My husband died 6 months ago," she said finally. "Car accident. He left behind more debts than assets, and I lost everything trying to pay them off. I need a fresh start somewhere nobody knows me." It wasn't entirely a lie. There had been a car accident. There had been debts. And she definitely needed to be somewhere nobody knew her. Jake nodded slowly, and she wondered if he could hear the parts of the story she wasn't telling. "I work this ranch alone," he said. 2,000 acres, about 100 head of cattle, some horses. It's hard work, and it's lonely work. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles down the road, and town is 30 minutes by truck. Winter can be brutal, and summer can be just as bad in its own way. If you're looking for excitement or company, this isn't the place." "I'm not looking for excitement," Maria said quietly. "I just need a place to stay and honest work." Jake studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see straight through her carefully constructed story to the truth underneath. But when he spoke, his voice was matter of fact. "Room and board, $300 a month cash, plus use of the truck when you need it for supplies. You'll cook 3 meals a day, keep the house clean, and help with the laundry. I'm not around much during the day, but I expect hot food when I come in. You'll have Sundays off, though there's not much to do with them out here." It wasn't a generous offer, but it was more than Maria had dared hope for. "That sounds fair. One more thing," Jake said, and his voice took on a harder edge. "I don't ask questions about your past, and you don't ask about mine. We keep things professional and simple. You do your job, I'll do mine, and we'll get along fine." The message was clear. Don't get attached, don't get personal, and don't expect anything beyond the basic arrangement. It was exactly what Maria needed to hear. She had no interest in getting close to anyone, not after what she had left behind. "I understand completely," she said. Jake nodded toward a doorway at the far end of the kitchen. "Your room's through there. Used to be the housekeeper's quarters back when my grandparents ran this place. It's got its own bathroom and entrance if you want to come, and go without going through the main house." He led her through the doorway into a small but comfortable space with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the back pasture. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and private, more than she had expected. "Dinner's at 6, Jake said from the doorway. "There's food in the kitchen, and you can figure out what to make. I'm not picky." He turned to leave, then paused. "What should I call you?" "Maria. Maria Santos. Welcome to the Circle M Ranch, Maria Santos." With that, he was gone, leaving her alone in the small room that would be her sanctuary, her prison, and her salvation all at once. Maria sat on the edge of the bed and looked around her new home. The walls were bare white, and the furniture was simple but sturdy. There was a cross hanging above the bed, and she wondered if the previous housekeeper had left it behind or if Jake had put it there himself. Somehow, she doubted the latter. She unpacked her few belongings into the dresser, hanging her 2 dresses in the small closet and placing her mother's rosary beads on the nightstand. Everything she owned in the world fit easily into the space of one drawer, which seemed like a metaphor for something, though she was too tired to figure out what. The bathroom was small but functional, with a shower that looked like it would provide decent water pressure and a mirror that reflected her face back at her with uncomfortable honesty. She looked tired and thin, older than her 28 years. Her dark hair hung limp around her shoulders, and her brown eyes held shadows that hadn't been there a year ago. But she was alive, and she was safe, at least for now. That was more than she had been able to say for weeks. Maria splashed cold water on her face and went to explore the kitchen, trying to get a sense of what Jake Morrison might like to eat. The refrigerator was nearly empty except for some eggs, milk that was close to its expiration date, and a package of bacon that had seen better days. The pantry was better stocked with canned goods and dried staples, enough to make a decent meal. She decided on scrambled eggs with bacon, biscuits from scratch, and coffee that was stronger and fresher than what he had served her earlier. Simple food, but prepared with care. As she worked, she tried to imagine what it would be like to live here, in this quiet house with the scarred stranger who had offered her shelter without asking too many questions. The kitchen began to smell like home as the biscuits baked and the bacon sizzled. Maria set the table for two, then wondered if she had assumed too much. Maybe Jake ate alone. Maybe he didn't want her company, just her cooking. She would have to learn the rules of this place, the unspoken boundaries that would keep them both safe. At exactly 6 o'clock, Jake appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had washed up and changed into a clean shirt, and Maria caught a glimpse of the man he might have been before whatever had put that scar on his face and that distance in his eyes. "Smells good," he said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. Maria served the food without speaking, then hesitated before taking the seat across from him. "Should I eat in my room?" Jake looked up from his plate, surprised. "Why would you do that?" "I wasn't sure about the arrangements." "You're not a servant, Maria. You're an employee. We eat together unless one of us has a reason not to." It was a small kindness, but after everything she had been through, it felt enormous. Maria sat down and picked up her fork, trying not to think about the last time she had shared a meal with someone who wasn't trying to hurt her or use her. They ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the distant lowing of cattle. Jake ate with the methodical efficiency of a man who viewed food as fuel rather than pleasure. But he cleaned his plate and went back for seconds on the biscuits. "These are good," he said, indicating the biscuits with his fork. "Thank you. My grandmother taught me to make them." It was the first personal thing she had shared, and she immediately regretted it. But Jake just nodded and continued eating, not pressing for more information. After dinner, Maria cleared the table and washed the dishes while Jake disappeared into what she assumed was his office. She could hear the low murmur of his voice as he made phone calls, handling the business of running a ranch. It was a comforting sound, steady and reliable. When the kitchen was clean, Maria retreated to her room, unsure of what else to do with herself. It was only 8 o'clock, but she was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. She had been running on adrenaline and fear for so long that the simple act of sitting still in a safe place felt overwhelming. She took a hot shower, letting the water wash away the dust of the road and some of the tension she had been carrying in her shoulders. When she emerged, she could hear Jake moving around in the main part of the house, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floors. Maria put on her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, looking out the window at the darkening landscape. The sky was clear, and she could see more stars than she ever had in the city. They stretched across the heavens like scattered diamonds, beautiful and remote. For the first time in months, she felt something that might have been peace. It was fragile and tentative, but it was there. Tomorrow she would wake up in this bed, in this room, in this house where a scarred stranger had offered her sanctuary without demanding an explanation. She thought about the man who had hired her, Jake Morrison, with his storm cloud eyes and his careful distance. There was pain in him. She recognized it because she carried her own, but there was also strength. He had built something here in this empty place, carved out a life from nothing but land and determination. Maria pulled back the covers and slipped into bed, her body sinking into the mattress with relief. The sheets smelled like sunshine and fresh air, and she realized that Jake must hang his laundry outside to dry. It was such a simple, domestic detail, but it told her something about the kind of man he was. As she drifted toward sleep, Maria allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she could stay. Not forever. She had learned not to think in terms of forever, but for now. And for now was enough. Maria woke before dawn, her internal clock still adjusting to ranch life after 3 weeks at the Circle M. The house was quiet except for the gentle creaking of settling wood and the distant sound of cattle stirring in the pastures. She had learned to love these early morning moments when the world felt new and full of possibility. She dressed quickly in jeans and a cotton blouse, her city clothes long since replaced by more practical attire that Jake had quietly provided after noticing her struggling with ranch chores in thin flats and delicate fabrics. He had left the clothes on her doorstep without explanation, just like he left fresh flowers from his grandmother's neglected garden every few days. He never acknowledged these small kindnesses, but Maria noticed each one. The kitchen was her domain now, and she moved through it with increasing confidence. Coffee first, strong and black the way Jake liked it. Then, breakfast preparation while the house slowly came to life around her. She had fallen into a rhythm here, something she had thought was lost to her forever. As bacon sizzled in the cast iron pan, Maria reflected on how much her life had changed since that first desperate afternoon when she had knocked on Jake's door. The fear that had driven her here was still present, lurking in the corners of her mind like shadows that refused to be fully dispelled. But it was no longer the only thing she felt when she woke up each morning. Jake appeared in the kitchen at exactly 6:15, as he did every morning, his hair still damp from the shower and his work shirt crisp despite the long day ahead. He poured himself coffee from the pot she had prepared and settled into his usual chair at the head of the table. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Good morning. How did the fence repair go yesterday?" Maria placed a plate in front of him loaded with eggs, bacon, and hash browns, then poured orange juice into his glass. "Got the north section finished. Should hold through winter." Jake ate methodically, but Maria noticed he was taking more time with his meals lately, less rushed than he had been during her first week. "Storm coming in tonight. Probably be a rough one." Maria glanced out the window at the clear morning sky, then back at Jake. She had learned to trust his weather predictions, honed by years of reading the subtle signs that the land provided. "Should I prepare anything special? Make sure we have extra water stored. And check that the generator has fuel. Power lines out here are temperamental in bad weather." He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "You ever been through a real storm, Maria? Not city rain, but the kind of weather that reminds you how small you really are." The question caught her off guard. In 3 weeks, Jake had never asked her anything personal beyond what was necessary for their working relationship. They had settled into a comfortable routine of polite distance, sharing meals and conversation about ranch business, but never venturing into the territory of their past lives or inner thoughts. "No," she said simply. "I grew up in apartment buildings where the worst weather meant staying inside and watching it through windows." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "It's different out here. The storms are bigger, louder. Nothing between you and the full force of what nature can do. Some people find it frightening. Others find it liberating. Which do you find it?" Maria asked before she could stop herself. Something shifted in Jake's expression, a brief softening around his eyes. "Both, I suppose. Depends on the day and what I'm trying to forget." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to examine. Maria busied herself cleaning the stove, and Jake finished his breakfast in silence. But something had changed in that moment, a small crack in the wall they had both built around themselves. After Jake left for the day, Maria threw herself into preparing for the storm. She filled every available container with water, checked the flashlights and battery supplies, and made sure the first aid kit was properly stocked. The generator in the shed needed fuel, so she wrestled with the heavy gas cans, spilling more on herself than she got into the tank. By mid-afternoon, she could feel the change in the air. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees, and the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of rain and something wilder, more primal. The horses in the near pasture were restless, pacing along the fence line with their ears pinned back. Maria had just finished securing the porch furniture when Jake returned from the range, his truck kicking up a trail of dust as he pulled up to the house. He climbed out of the cab with the easy grace of a man who was comfortable in his body despite the scar that marked him, and Maria found herself watching him more carefully than she should have. "Storm's moving faster than I expected," he said, glancing at the darkening sky. "We'll probably lose power before midnight." "Everything's ready," Maria reported. "Water, fuel, supplies. I made a big pot of stew in case we can't cook later." Jake nodded approvingly, then hesitated. "Maria, you should know that I sometimes have trouble during storms. If I seem distressed during the night, just stay in your room. It's not about you." The admission cost him something. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders and the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. Maria wanted to ask what had happened to him, what memories the storms brought back, but she recognized the courage it had taken for him to warn her. "I understand," she said simply. The first drops of rain began to fall as they finished dinner, fat droplets that struck the windows like thrown pebbles. By 8 o'clock, the storm had arrived in earnest, turning the world outside into a chaos of wind and water. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, leaving them in the warm glow of candles and the battery-powered radio that crackled with weather warnings. Maria cleaned up the dinner dishes by candlelight while Jake sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. She could feel the tension radiating from him, see the way his jaw was clenched against whatever memories the storm was stirring up. "Tell me about the city," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the sound of rain against the windows. Maria paused in her dishwashing, surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. What you liked about it, what you missed when you first got here. Just talk to me." She understood then that he needed distraction, something to focus on besides whatever demons the storm was awakening. So she told him about the neighborhood where she had grown up, with its narrow streets, and the way music spilled out of open windows on summer evenings. She described the little cafe where she used to buy coffee and pastry every morning, how the owner knew her order by heart and would have it ready before she reached the counter. "There was always noise," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Traffic, people talking, music, construction. I thought I needed quiet to think, but when I got here, the silence was almost overwhelming." "And now?" Jake asked, his voice softer than usual. "Now I think the silence lets you hear things you were missing before. The way the house settles at night, how different the wind sounds depending on which direction it's coming from, the way the cattle call to each other across the pastures." Thunder crashed overhead, close enough to rattle the windows, and Jake flinched involuntarily. His hand moved to the scar on his face, a gesture that seemed unconscious, automatic. "Tell me about your grandmother," Maria said quickly, searching for something to pull him back from wherever the storm was taking him. "You mentioned she used to run this ranch with your grandfather." Jake's hand dropped from his face, and he looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. "Elena Morrison was 4 feet 11 inches of pure determination," he said, and for the first time since she had known him, Maria heard warmth in his voice. She could rope a steer, birth a calf, and have dinner on the table for 12 ranch hands, all in the same day. "My grandfather used to say he married above his station." "Is that her garden? The one with the flowers you've been picking?" Jake nodded. "She planted it when they first built this house, back in 1952. Said every ranch needed something beautiful that served no practical purpose, just to remind people that life wasn't only about survival." Another crash of thunder, this one close enough to make the house shudder. Jake's composure cracked for just a moment, and Maria saw something raw and frightened flash across his face before he could hide it again. "Jake," she said gently, "what happened to you?" For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. The storm raged outside, and the candle flames danced in the drafts that found their way through the old windows. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Afghanistan. 3 tours. The last one, there was an explosion. IED. I was the only one in my unit who made it out." His hand touched the scar again. "This is the least of what it left me with." Maria felt her heart clench with sympathy, but she kept her voice steady. "Is that why you came back to the ranch? Didn't have anywhere else to go? Couldn't sleep in the city, too many people, too much noise. Couldn't hold down a regular job because storms like this would send me hiding under desks like a broken child." He laughed bitterly. "Some hero, right?" "You are a hero," Maria said firmly. "You served your country, and you survived something horrible. Coming back here, building this life, that takes a different kind of courage. Jake looked at her with surprise, as if he wasn't used to anyone seeing strength where he saw only damage. What about you, Maria? What are you really running from? The question hung between them like a challenge. Maria had been dreading this moment for weeks, knowing that eventually the careful distance they maintained would break down and the truth would demand to be told. But, sitting in the candlelit kitchen with the storm raging outside, and Jake's honesty still echoing in the air, she found that she wanted to tell him. My ex-husband, she said simply. David Santos. I thought I loved him when I married him. But love and control look a lot alike when you're young and don't know the difference. Jake's expression hardened. He hurt you. It wasn't a question, and Maria didn't treat it like one. For 3 years, he hurt me. Physically, emotionally, financially. He isolated me from my friends, my family, made me dependent on him for everything. I tried to leave twice, but he always found me, always convinced me to come back. What changed? Maria was quiet for a long moment, remembering. He went too far one night, put me in the hospital. While I was there, a social worker helped me understand that next time, I might not be lucky enough to survive. So I planned. Saved money $1 at a time, hid it where he wouldn't think to look. Got copies of my documents. And when he went out of town on business 6 months ago, I disappeared. The car accident story? There was a car accident. David was driving drunk and hit a family of 4. He walked away without a scratch, but they didn't. The civil lawsuit took everything he had, which meant I was finally free to take what was left of my life and run. Thunder crashed again, and this time neither of them flinched. Somehow, sharing their secrets had stripped the storm of some of its power to frighten them. Have you thought about what you'll do when winter's over? Jake asked. This job was supposed to be temporary. Maria had been thinking about it more and more lately, dreading the day when Jake would tell her he no longer needed her help. I'll find something else, I suppose. Maybe in town. What if you didn't have to? The question was quiet, almost lost in the sound of rain against the windows. Maria looked up to find Jake watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. What do you mean? I mean this ranch is too big for one person to run alone. I mean you've brought something back to this house that's been missing since my grandmother died. I mean maybe we could help each other heal instead of just hiding from the world. Maria's heart began to race. But she forced herself to think clearly. Jake, we barely know each other. We're both running from things that hurt us. That's not exactly the foundation for something lasting. Maybe not, he admitted. But maybe that's exactly what makes it worth trying. We both know what it's like to lose everything. Maybe that means we know how to appreciate what we have. Before Maria could respond, a tremendous crash of thunder shook the house, and every candle in the kitchen blew out at once. They were plunged into absolute darkness, the only light coming from the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. Stay where you are, Jake said, his voice calm despite what she knew the darkness must be doing to him. I'll get the flashlight. But Maria was already moving, guided by weeks of familiarity with the kitchen layout. She found the flashlight in the drawer by feel and switched it on, casting a circle of warm light between them. Jake was sitting exactly where she had left him, his hands flat on the table, his breathing carefully controlled. Thank you, he said simply. Maria set the flashlight on the table between them, then made a decision that surprised them both. She reached across the small space and covered one of his hands with hers. You don't have to be afraid of the dark when I'm here, she said. And I don't have to be afraid of staying in one place when you're here. Maybe that's enough to start with. Jake turned his hand palm up and laced his fingers through hers. His skin was warm and calloused from years of ranch work, steady and strong despite the tremor she could feel running through him. I can't promise I won't have bad nights, he said. The storms, the memories, they don't just go away because I want them to. I can't promise I won't have moments when I want to run, Maria replied. 3 years of living in fear doesn't disappear overnight. Then, we'll take it one day at a time. One storm at a time. They sat in the circle of flashlight, holding hands across Jake's grandmother's kitchen table while the storm raged outside. It wasn't a declaration of love or a promise of forever. It was something simpler and more honest, two damaged people choosing to trust each other with their broken places. The power came back on just before dawn, sudden and startling after hours of darkness. The refrigerator hummed to life, and the coffee maker beeped its readiness. But Jake and Maria continued to sit in the gentle glow of the flashlight, neither ready to break the spell that the long night had woven around them. "I should start breakfast," Maria said finally, though she made no move to let go of his hand. "In a minute," Jake said. "I want to remember this, the way you look right now, the way this feels, before the sun comes up, and we have to figure out what comes next." Maria smiled, the first completely genuine smile she had given anyone in over a year. "What comes next is coffee and eggs and another day of learning how to live here. The rest we can figure out as we go." Jake squeezed her hand gently, then released it, allowing the practical world to intrude on their moment of connection. But as Maria moved around the kitchen preparing breakfast, she could feel the weight of his attention on her, warm and appreciative and completely without demand. Outside, the storm was moving on, leaving behind the clean smell of rain-washed earth and the promise of a clear day. The ranch would need attention, fences to check, animals to account for, damage to assess and repair. But for now, in the quiet sanctuary of Elena Morrison's kitchen, two broken people had found something that looked like hope. 3 months had passed since the storm that changed everything between Maria and Jake. The brutal heat of summer had given way to the golden warmth of early autumn, and the ranch had settled into the rhythm of seasonal preparation. Maria found herself thinking less about the past and more about the future, something she would have thought impossible 6 months ago. She stood in Elena Morrison's garden, now flourishing under her careful attention, picking tomatoes for the evening meal. The garden had become her special project, a way to honor the woman who had first brought beauty to this harsh land. Jake had given her free rein to expand and replant, and she had discovered a love for coaxing life from the earth that surprised her with its intensity. The Henderson place sold. Jake called from the porch, where he was mending a bridle. New family moving in next month. Maria looked up from the tomato plants, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. In the months since their conversation during the storm, they had grown closer in ways both subtle and profound. There were no dramatic declarations or grand gestures, just a gradual weaving together of two lives that had learned to trust again. "Family with children?" she asked, walking toward the porch with her basket of vegetables. "3 kids, according to Tom Henderson. City folks, like you were." Jake's tone held no judgment, just observation. "Husband, some kind of writer, wants the quiet to work. Wife's a teacher, going to commute into town for the school year." Maria settled onto the porch step, the basket between her feet. "They'll learn like I did. The quiet grows on you once you stop fighting it." Jake set down his work and looked at her with the expression that still caught her off guard sometimes, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real, that she had chosen to stay. "You ever miss it? The city noise, the crowds." "Sometimes," Maria said honestly. "I miss the convenience of everything being close by. I miss my neighbor Mrs. Chun, who used to give me soup when I was sick. I miss the feeling that I could disappear into the crowd when I needed to be invisible." She paused, considering. "But I don't miss the fear. Here, when I hear footsteps, they're yours. When someone knocks on the door, it's the mailman or Tom Henderson with news about his cattle. I never realized how much energy I was spending just being afraid until I stopped having to do it." Jake nodded slowly. In the months since they had shared their secrets, he had opened up more about his own struggles. The nightmares still came, especially during storms, but they were less frequent. Maria had learned to recognize the signs, the way his jaw would clench, how he'd unconsciously touch his scar, and she had developed her own ways of helping him find his way back to the present. "Dr. Reeves called today," Jake said, referring to the VA counselor he had finally agreed.